Economic freedom, as purported by a bunch of champagne-sipping red-capped racists who call themselves the economic freedom fighters, is probably the biggest political deception of our time. Economic freedom in our lifetime chants Julius Malema while demanding nationalization, aggressive regulation, and the scrapping of property rights. We are inspired by the economic policies of comrades Hugo Chavez of Venezuela and Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, they say, stating that they have the answer for South Africa's economic woes. Economic freedom will be achieved once the EFF ascends to power, they say. But what actually happened in these countries? Let's take a look. Right from the outset, since the founding of the EFF, its leaders have argued that the people of South Africa would get rich if the EFF gets into power. This would be achieved through radical economic policies such as those implemented in Zimbabwe and Venezuela. Well, I guess it depends on your definition of rich. During a recent visit to Zimbabwe, I was able to obtain a collection of Zimbabwean dollars printed in 2009 before the currency was scrapped. And I am indeed a very wealthy man because I now carry with me in Zimbabwean currency a $1 billion note, a $5 billion note, a $10 billion note, a $20 billion note, a $50 billion note, and wait for it, a $20 trillion note. But that's not all. The Zimbabwean government eventually printed a $100 trillion note. The problem, however, lies in the value of these notes, which we'll get to soon. President Hugo Chavez was able to lead Venezuela into an era where the wealth of Venezuela was returned to the ownership of the people as a whole, said Malema, who visited both Mugabe and Chavez in 2010 and came back as an inspired man. Malema and the EFF leadership has also repeatedly stated that they are inspired by the policies of Mugabe and that they plan on doing the same in South Africa. If Zimbabwe takes land and other countries near Zimbabwe don't take land, then the land struggle will not succeed. They will simply leave Zimbabwe for South Africa and irritate us here. The goal is, of course, to redistribute the wealth to the people, as they say. This, they believe, would allegedly be done by implementing the economic policies of the world's worst economies. In 2000, the Mugabe regime embarked on a radical economic transformation process during which white-owned farms were forcibly seized and redistributed, mostly to members of the ruling party. Production on most of these farms stopped almost completely. When I recently drove through Zimbabwe from the north to the south, I did not see a single operational commercial farm. Either than nationalization, aggressive state regulation of the labor market was implemented, including high taxes and strong subsidizing of state enterprises. The result was quite predictably the crashing of the Zimbabwean economy and a massive outflow of people. Zimbabwe faced 231 million% peak hyperinflation by 2008. Bankruptcy among entrepreneurs skyrocketed and 80% of the population now lives below the poverty line. Unemployment rose to 95% in 2009, making it officially the world's most unemployed country. Before abandoning the Zimbabwean dollar, most general laborers were paid under 200 billion Zimbabwean dollars per month. But this equals 60 cents in US currency. A nurse's salary was less half the cost of a soft drink. And eventually, 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars was worth only about 40 US cents. Not even enough to buy one bus ticket. Which means that the Zimbabwean dollars that I now carry with me is worth about 10 cents. A 2014 report by the Africa Progress Panel found that it would take 190 years for the country to double its GDP per capita if they were to continue with their existing ideas for renewed economic growth. Does this sound like economic freedom to you? This is exactly the type of economic freedom that Julius Malema and the EFF are pushing for. Now let's look at Venezuela, a country that experienced steady economic growth up until the 1980s when oil prices collapsed. Inflation was already on a sharp rise before Hugo Chavez took office in 1999, but by then, however, Venezuela was still the richest country in Latin America, largely thanks to its vast oil supplies. But this was soon to change when Chavez's promise of a socialist revolution was implemented. Chavez embarked on aggressive regulation, price controls, expropriation of farmland and industries, and a bunch of other stuff that Julius Malema would describe as inspirational ideas. The result: a steep rise in the price of all common goods, including food and water. The amount of people who live below the poverty line skyrocketed to 82%, and inflation currently sits at an inspirational 720%. Currently, there are people in Venezuela who eat dogs and other roadkill simply because they don't have anything to eat. The socialist revolution in Venezuela has now reached a point where people are literally eating each other to survive. This is the direct result of the type of policies advocated by the EFF. The movement openly calls for aggressive regulation, nationalization of industries, the expropriation of property without compensation, and various other inspirational Mugabean and Chavezian ideas. The party also makes it clear that its policy is one of state ownership, not private property, not even for black people. Zimbabwe and Venezuela are consistently rated among the world's worst economies and have been noted as the countries with the least amount of, you guessed it, economic freedom. Precisely as a result of the policies that the so-called economic freedom fighters wish to pursue. My name is Ernst Roets, and this is your fact sheet.